do that, brother.
No way.
It's a pretty big head.
Welcome back to the Chip Lunch Podcast. It is excellent to have you along with us, whether you are listening to us on your favourite podcast app or on watching us on YouTube. And I'm here on my own as a host, but I'm not here alone on the actual podcast because I have Marty Simons joining me. How are you, my friend?
I am well, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for joining us on this.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's an auspicious day.
It is an auspicious day.
You told me before that you listened to almost all of our podcasts that Soul Revival are doing. So
yes, long-term subscriber, first-time interviewer, being interviewed. So, I've listened to all of the podcasts. It's been good in the earlier stages, listening to the history of Soul Revival and, right back from Gaimea days to now and to the present. The last one about what happened to evangelism. And
that was
a great season. That was really
I
really
mean, I learned heaps doing that season as well.
Absolutely.
So,
going through the history of evangelism and then where we're at today was really interesting.
Yeah, it was. And I think, like I said, I learned a lot. And I think I feel more equipped to share my faith after doing that season of the Shock of August.
Absolutely.
So, that was cool. You're wearing a different kind of jacket that's usually around these areas. It's a South Sydney Rabbitohs jacket.
Yes.
Where does that come from, being a Rabbitohs supporter?
Rabbitohs supporter? Well, it's kind of, like most supporters, it's in the family. So my parents were South supporters, my uncles were South supporters, and it's just a generational thing. Yeah. I was actually born in Marrickville, which is like the middle of South Country. So, just am. Just bleed red and green.
Marrickville is South Sydney? Is that considered South Sydney?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. I suppose it because they used to be. Were they at Redfern Oval?
They are at Redfern Oval.
Yeah, that's where they train and
that's
stuff.
That's where they train. Yeah.
Right, and that's reasonably close to Marrickville. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. We had Amy Jamison on the last episode, and she is the son. She's the daughter of Bob Sheens, who is. Bob Sheens is related to Tim Sheens,
yes,
the regular NRL coach. So yes. I didn't know that until the podcast. So
I did not know that until just right there.
We're just dropping knowledge everywhere on this podcast. Let's start the actual podcast. Get into it.
Okay.
We always ask the first question we always ask is on Chip Lunch is how do you like to eat your hot chips, Marty?
I don't like it smothered in gravy, but I like it. I like a bit of gravy on the side so that you can dip the hot chip into the gravy.
So gravy?
Yeah.
Not like a tomato or barbecue sauce.
No, I don't mind it with tomato sauce. I suppose that was the original go-to sauce when you had chips growing up. But then I was introduced to the gravy and, just a gravy pot on the side and a side of gravy and you might pour a little bit on it, but... yeah, it's good.
I struggle with gravy. I don't. It's not my favourite thing. But is there a particular place that you like to get your chips from, or a place that you've got a lot of memories from, even when you're a kid?
Mate. When I was a kid, the best chips. We're going a long way back now.
Love it.
Was at Balgownie. There was a fish and chip shop in Balgownie down at Wollongong. And they were owned by a Greek family, and they wrapped their chips old school, so it was in the newspaper. Right. And the flavour of chips were different back then because the ink of the the paper would permeate the chips a bit, and so you get this bit of a different flavour to the chip as opposed to today. But no, they were the best. Salt. Not chicken salt.
Yes.
And not a fan of the chicken salt.
Yeah, me either.
No. Salt. It was at my grandparents, so they liked a bit of vinegar. But back then it was the old dead horse sauce and
what is dead horse sauce?
Tomato sauce.
Oh, okay.
It's blood.
It's like one of
dead
those
horse sauce. So it's just one of those old.
That's
so right, I'll
That's
come
like-
out with stuff like that.
Well, but that's all those random Australian sayings, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Like,
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like I'm
yeah.
gonna make like a, is that
Yeah.
make like a tree and leave?
Leave,
Yeah,
yeah.
and all those ones. Anyway,
Yeah.
second question
Yep.
is how did you become a Christian?
That's a really good question. That's something I've actually contemplated on for quite a while, because I actually thought, I think I became a Christian as a teenager over in Perth, Western Australia. I was part of quite a large youth group over there, and I remember giving my life to Jesus, but at the same time, my life wasn't reflecting that confession of faith.
Yep.
You know, so that's why I say I'm not 100% sure. And then, so that was back in 1986, and then
That was the year I was born. Sorry.
well, that's all right.
That makes me old too, though.
That's true. And then in 1988, I moved up to the Kimberley, and I was, as I said, I was at this really thriving youth group in Western Australia in Perth. And when I moved up to the Kimberley to go live with my parents, I got an apprenticeship at the hospital as a carpenter. The church there didn't have any youth, no kids or anything. And so the people that I associated with were the other apprentices my age, and none of them went to church, and then none of the guys in the maintenance department went to church. And so just, you know, it wasn't through, I'm no longer believing in God or want anything to do with the church or anything like that anymore. It was just one of those things where the world sneaks up on you, and all of a sudden you're not going to church if, you know, 2 or 3 weeks, and then you're not going at all, and then you're just swept away with life. And so I lived a life that wasn't pleasing to the Lord, let's put it that way, for a number of years, about 6 years, almost 7 years. And then 1994, the 1st of April, which I love God's sense of humour, April Fool's Day, and it was actually a Good Friday.
Oh, okay.
In 1994. And that night, I was living in Kununurra, which is where Jim and Nat Watson live now. I don't know if you know those guys from Gymea.
I remember that name from Gymea Anglican.
Yeah. So Kununurra only had 2 TV stations. One of them was ABC and one of them was Golden West Network.
Ooh.
And there was nothing on the ABC at the time from memory. But on GWN was the old Charlton Heston movie, 10 Commandments.
Okay.
I don't know if have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't seen it. No.
Yeah, mate. It's good. It's a must see.
Okay. Are they streaming that or what?
They could
They
do,
should be. It'd be
actually.
somewhere.
They could
I'll have a look.
It's on every year around Christmas and Easter.
Oh, is it?
They
Okay.
put it on. Anyway, good old Charlton Heston. Anyway, so the pubs weren't open, which because it was Good Friday. There was no parties going on, which was unusual for Kununurra. And so I decided to stay home and watch the movie. At the end of the movie, I went to bed and I was really troubled in myself, and I just couldn't sleep. I had everything going on from the movie going on in my head. And I started thinking about my own life. And I know that this is probably not a normal situation, but God was talking to me, not in an audible voice, but it seemed like an audible voice, like you and I are talking now. And he said to me, right, Marty, it's time for you to come back. And I said, well, I'm not ready to come back. I don't want to come back. I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now. I was having fun with my friends and enjoying what the world had to offer. You know what I mean? And God said, well, let's have a look at what you've done with yourself. And he said, what have you done? You've had the reins. I've given you the reins to your life. What have you done with it? And I look back and I hadn't done anything. It was just all about indulging the joys of life, the drinking and partying and the things that go on with that. And then he said, okay. And he actually opened up my mind and showed me the times where I should have been dead. And he saved my life. So, an OD, a time where I fell asleep at the wheel of the car and was heading off the side of the road, about to go down a cliff, but woke me up and was able to get out of that miraculously. And just a number of other situations where I shouldn't be sitting with you today. And so we wrestled for a while. It was like it was like my Jacob moment, but thankfully he didn't touch my hip. But I couldn't argue. There was nothing else to argue. And
like you'd ran out of
arguments. I ran out of arguments. Yeah, I just there was no other reason to. So I gave my life to Jesus that night. I fell asleep after that, and then went outside, and I was still living with my parents at the time, and I went out into the kitchen, and they were both standing there, which was not normal, but. Normally they're doing things and that time of the day, but they were both in there and they looked at me and both of them said, what's wrong? Are you all right? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. They said, no, what's wrong? There's something different about you. I said, yeah, there is something different about me. And they said, well, what's happened? And I said, well, I gave my life to Jesus last night. And they just broke into tears, and I broke into tears, and we had that loving, it was just a loving moment. And I haven't looked back since. Saying that, I had to leave Kununurra to be able to continue to move forward and grow. Because of who I was and the reputation and the friends that I had there, it was just a place I couldn't stay in. The church was really, really small. There was no one to support me or anything like that. So I had to get out. Right. So at the end of 94, 95, I left Kununurra. Yeah.
First of all, what a great way to start the podcast. great story. Do you mind if I just rewind a little bit? So you were born in Perth?
No.
Okay.
No, I was born in Marrickville.
Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me.
You did say that, by the way. Sorry.
I did. That's okay. But I was only there for 6 months.
Yeah.
No, it's a bit more complicated than that. Then we moved back down to Wollongong. Wollongong is where my parents grew up, and both my grandparents, both sides, when they were alive, were down there, and I've still got family down there. So we grew up. We moved back there. My dad was not a Christian at the time, so that's interesting. So I grew up with a lot of violence in my family,
right?
And myself mainly, and my brother under me. So I'm one of 5 boys, and the 2 of us were the ones that received the most of the violence, and particularly myself. And I remember it wasn't until I was about 9 that Dad became a Christian, and then we moved up to North Curl, where he went to Church Army College, which is like it was an evangelistic college. It was run by the Anglican Church, but it was over at Belmore. So we were living over that way for a couple of years. The violence still hadn't left Dad then. That took a while for that to leave him. But it was hard to, and I suppose that was one of the things that was really hard to try and understand, was Dad calling himself a Christian and acting like a Christian at home, at church and at college, but then beating on us at home. And I couldn't marry the two together.
Yeah.
And I understand now, on one level I understand, because it's some things are really so deeply seated within us that the changes don't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And especially if his father, and his father was violent, or I was on the receiving end of his father as well, on both my grandfathers, as well as my dad. So he knew violence, and that's how he was disciplined. And so when it came to me, that's all he knew. And so that's how he disciplined myself and my other brother with violence. But it's interesting that all of us, the 5 of us, made a collective decision to break that cycle, the cycle of violence within our own families. So none of us have ever used violence when it comes to disciplining our kids, because we just know the destructiveness that it had on our lives, and we just didn't want that for our kids. And we didn't want that for ourselves. And
are you brothers and sisters Christian?
No. No. I've got no sisters. It's 4 brothers.
Yep.
Yeah, none of them are Christian. And again, you don't like for speaking ill. And my dad died 2 years ago, but of cancer. But it doesn't change the fact that what he was like
Leaves an imprint.
Absolutely, it does.
In more than one.
Yeah, that's right.
One
And
way.
so, my brothers aren't Christians because of that.
Yeah.
Sadly, they told him as well, which they were hard conversations before he died. They told him. So I don't know. I don't know how he took that. Dad was pretty stoic like that. He didn't really show a lot of emotion and things like that. And I suppose that's been instilled on probably more myself than the rest of my brothers. But that's where Jesus has, ever since I've been a Christian, been continually changing, molding, transforming, bringing down barriers, breaking cycles, transforming hearts and minds, which has been great. It's been nearly, what did I say, 1994? So what, it'll be 28 years now a Christian. Still a lot of work to be done, brother.
Same here.
Still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Until eternity.
Yeah.
Always be work on.
You're saying you lived in quite a few different places.
Yeah.
Well, so you were jumping around a fair bit. What was that from? Was that your parents with different jobs, or it's just?
So after Dad graduated from Church Army, he joined up with BCA. I don't know if you've heard of BCA, Bush Church Aid Society.
Okay.
It's an Anglican mission organisation within Australia. mainly supports Outback Ministry. So we actually went to Central Queensland when he finished college to a mining town called Middlemount. It was a brand new town. It was really interesting to be in a brand new town. All the shops, the police station, everything was ATCO. I don't know if you know those ATCO buildings, the white building site buildings. You know, they got the white walls with the yellow bit around the top. You don't know an ATCO?
No,
anyway. A site building.
Okay.
Anyway, they call them dongers, actually.
Okay.
ATCO dongers. So they were everywhere. The town was just like that. It was just all these ATCO dongers everywhere, and they were building houses and all these things. It was an interesting place because every time something was opened, good old Joby Olkey Peterson, which is before your time, the Premier of Queensland at the time, he'd come and he'd open up the building or the pool or wherever. And the school had to go along and attend and listen to old Joe banging on about whatever he was talking about. And at the end, he'd say, right, the kids have had to endure me speaking for however long. They can have tomorrow off from school. And all the kids are going, yes. And all the teachers are going, yes. And so every time we found out Joe was coming to town, we knew the next day we were getting the day off. So that was really good. It was where I also met the Duke of Edinburgh in Middlemount.
Who's the Duke of Edinburgh? Is that
the Queen's
husband? Prince Philip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to remember
Prince Philip.
Yeah, Prince Philip.
Yeah, Prince Philip. I got to meet him. I was a scout in Middlemount, and we were part of his, I don't know, guard of honour type of thing.
Yeah.
He came to open up a supermarket. It was hilarious.
Nice.
It was, it's kind of
very royal.
very, very royal, very regal. middle of central Queensland, and we've got Prince Philip coming to cut a ribbon to open up the supermarket. Yeah, this is what I came here for. The wife's, I don't know where she is at the time, but he's stuck in central Queensland opening up a supermarket. Anyway, I remember him coming out, and he was tall. And he stopped in front of me and he looked down and he shook me hand, put his hand out and he shook me hand and he goes, "You're doing a good job there, son." And then he kept walking and I went, "Oh, well, there's my brush with royalty there." So, from Queensland, we ended up back in Sydney and we were out at an interesting place, Claymore. I've heard of Claymore. No, it's a suburb of Campbelltown.
Okay.
It was and still is, but I think a lot of it's been closed now. It was 100% housing commission, and Dad was asked to plant a church there.
Okay.
So we moved into housing commission accommodation for about 18 months, which was while the church accommodation was being built. And that was interesting to say the least. Living in housing commission, especially in Claymore, you hear the odd gunshot at night time, and it's just a few things you just wouldn't experience outside of housing commission. And we were there for 3 years. Not in housing commission, but at that church for 3 years. Then that's when we ended up in Perth after that. So we're talking 1985 now. Ended at 85, 86, we moved to Perth. I lived there for 2 years before we ended up to the Kimberley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So Kimberley's up in Northern Territory, right?
Northwest Western Australia.
Oh, it's in Western Australia.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we moved up to a town called Derby, and that's where Dad was at the church. That was again a BCA church, and that's where I did my apprenticeship as a carpenter at the hospital there, DRH, Derby Regional Hospital. The town's designed to support Aboriginal people. The population was 70% Aboriginal. It's a government town, or it was at the time. I haven't been back there for a long time.
What does a government town mean?
Well, that was the main employer.
Oh, okay.
So the hospital,
Yeah.
the electricity, the water, the phone, it was the biggest employer was the government. ATSIC at the time. I was up there during Marbo, so it was really interesting seeing all that going on in the town.
Yep.
But yeah, I was there for 4.5 years, and then went to Kununurra and lived there for another 2.5 years, and that's when I became a Christian in
Kununurra is
East
WA?
Kimberley.
Okay. Yep. Or is it in?
So
it's closer to Northern Territory.
Maybe for everyone, Broome.
Yeah.
Right?
On the map. Yep.
On the map, Broome.
Yes.
About 3 hours north on the coast still is Derby, which has got the biggest tides in Australia. It's 12-metre tides.
Really?
Right. So when the tide goes out, you can look out for miles. There's just no water. But it comes in so fast. It comes in faster than you can run. So you'd see a number of people drown because they'd be out there trying to crab in the mud or whatever.
And the tide's coming in.
The tide caught them out and they came in. So there's a few people who drowned during that. You're also taking the risk of crocs and things like that when you're doing that sort of thing. And then Kununurra's more on the east. It's about, I think it's about 40 Ks. I can't remember. About 40 Ks from the Northern Territory border. But you got the bungles and all that in between and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting place to visit.
Yeah, so a lot of hopping around, moving around.
Absolutely.
How do you think that shaped you?
In good ways and bad ways. In good ways because it's allowed me to be flexible. It's allowed me to be able to relate to people in a broader way. It's given me a lot of life experience. I've seen a lot of things and lived in a lot of places that most people wouldn't have. Like my wife, born and bred shy girl, never, it wasn't until her first posting as a teacher that she went out to Maureen. But that seems to be the case in the city, and especially in the Southern Shire. No one leaves the Shire. You're just here, and why wouldn't you? I mean, I've been living here for a long time now, and I love it. I've got no plans of going anywhere.
Yeah.
It's the longest place I've ever lived is here. So yeah, it's given me a lot of experience. It's helped me in my jobs. It's helped me to relate to people. The hard things, though, for me, the hardest thing was loss of friendships.
Yeah.
Starting afresh. You got to remember that all these different schools I was going to, there was no such thing as a national curriculum. So when you go from New South Wales to Queensland, which is a different curriculum and just different everything, and then back to New South Wales, and then and then across to Perth, they were all different curriculums. And so moving around a lot did mess up my schooling. Sadly, it messed up my schooling a lot. To the point where I haven't even got a Year 10 certificate.
Okay.
That's how much it's messed up.
Yeah.
It doesn't count now at my age, but it's one of the regrets I have is not having my HSC.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things I have.
So you left school, kind of left school around the supposed year 10 mark?
Yes, but I was also in an experimental school.
Oh, okay.
So it was the first one of its kind in Australia. And it was an American school using American curriculum.
Okay.
So and it was a self-paced, so it was like homeschooling but at school.
Okay.
Right. So homeschooling, you've got your own books and you learn at your own pace, and there was the whole school like that, where the teachers just facilitated, and you had to learn. You had to teach yourself by just reading, and it didn't work. And well, again, because it was American curriculum, I had to do all these entrance exams, and because I wasn't meeting the American curriculum, there was some stuff that I had to go right back to year 7. So for me to graduate year 10, which was a normal year 10, that's the year I was in, I'd have to make up 4 years of school in a year just to graduate year 10.
Yeah.
And that was that wasn't on all subjects, but there were 2 or 3 subjects where I had to go from year 7 through to year 10, where some of them were year 8 or some of them were year 9. None of them were ever year 10. And you had to make up multiple years just to graduate. Well, I just couldn't do that. I don't think anyone could do that, to be honest. And, yeah, I had a choice. I could either, at the end of the year, my parents said, well, we're going up to Derby, the Kimberley. You can either come with us and do year 11 and 12 there. And I went, no, I've had enough. I've been to too many schools.
Yeah. You're kind of tired of school.
I was just tired of
chopping
school.
and changing.
Tired. And, again, that year at that school, because it took me out of the normal like state schools or whatever, just the normal Australian curriculum, it put me behind again, So I just went, no. So I went to TAFE. I stayed in Perth and boarded with an uncle and auntie of mine and went to TAFE. I did what's known as a pre-apprenticeship. And that's where you spend a term, 4 terms, and a term in 4 different trades, and at the end of it, you kind of decide what you want to do, which trade you want to do. So, yeah, I did that for 12 months, and then got an apprenticeship as a carpenter.
And that was up in Derby.
That was up in Derby at the hospital.
Derby. So you told the story about how you became a Christian years later after that. If we go back to that time, you said you had to move out of Kununurra because it wasn't a very helpful place to be in.
No.
Where did you go, and what changed for you after, like, from that point onwards?
Brother. Well, when I became a Christian, one of the things that God said to me was, I want you to go and formally study. I want you to study the Word, and I want you to go into ministry. And I went, okay. So my parents decided to contact the bishop, and I won't name him, but the bishop at the time, and he recommended that I go to this place just to make it a bit more complicated, brother, Dalby. D-A-L-B-Y.
Okay.
No, not D-E-R-B-Y. Dalby.
Yep.
And it was a thing called Cornerstone. I never heard of Cornerstone. But anyway, he recommended this place. So a mate and myself left Kununurra. We travelled across Australia to Sydney. We went to the 1995 Big Day Out, which was very important at the time.
Who was the headliner there?
Ministry.
I don't even know who Ministry is. You didn't stay for that?
No, I
act?
didn't stay for that. Yeah, they're pretty hardcore kind of. Yeah, they had a goat's head on their microphone with the satanic symbol behind.
Okay.
And there wasn't my kind of music.
Yeah. Who did you go to see?
Well, Hole was playing.
Okay.
Strike. There's a few different bands. I can't remember. That's a long time ago, brother.
Well, you're telling the story about Cornerstone. I'll look up the 1995 Big Day Out lineup.
Yeah, you do that. So anyway, after the big day out, he was driving back to Kununurra and he dropped me at Dolby at Cornerstone. And my mate, we rocked up to this, like a farm, and it had a couple of those Atco dongers, which is where you slept out the back, right? And my mate's going, bro, are you sure this is where you want to be dropped off? Like, you sure this is where you want to be? He didn't feel right about it. And I went, yeah, this is it, mate. This is where I'm supposed to be. He goes, all right. So he dropped me off, and it quickly, it didn't take long to find out that where I was dropped off was a cult.
Okay.
And
gosh, you've got some stories.
And the reason I found that out pretty quickly was they basically isolated you from the outside world. So you weren't allowed, there was no TV, you weren't allowed a radio, you weren't allowed to listen to the news, you weren't allowed to watch the news or any TV shows or anything like that. You were, in their words, set apart from the world, right? So they're using these biblical terms and stuff like that. And so I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And there was probably about a dozen of us out there, and who were here to study the Bible. You literally worked for $1 a day, like a literal $1 a day, and I think that comes down from the biblical. It's not a principle, but remember that the denarii.
Yep.
The 1 denarii a day was your worker's wage, and so they would pay you $1. So you would get $7 a week because you work 7 days a week. You didn't have a day off.
They were taking into
inflation
inflation
the Sabbath and all that
currency
too.
exchanges into
that's right.
account.
So you filled up, and you worked. You filled up chaff bags in the day from this chaffing machine, and then the way that they made their money was they ran a pizza shop at night. So you'd go in and you'd be making pizzas till whatever time at night. I was a delivery driver, so I used to flog around in their delivery car, and then you'd start your day over again. And you work, I don't know how many, you were up really early. You had to, so there was no electric, the hot water, you had to light a fire and heat the water up so you could use the water. There was a cow that you had to milk every morning to get your own milk. And it was just really, really dodgy. You know, it was like being taken right back to primitive days. Anyway, I met a few guys there. I don't know them now. I got to wear my New South Wales jersey though in Queensland, and that was hilarious. Walking down the main street of Dolby, me and this other guy is a similar height and size to me, both of us in our Blues jersey walking down the main street. The looks that we got was hilarious, and we got a bit of abuse and stuff like that. That was a bit of fun. But when I got a little bit crook, and I didn't have a car or anything, and I went up to the people, the people that ran the place. I said, I need to go see a doctor. And they said, well, what's wrong with you? I said, I just need to go see a doctor. Well, you need to tell us what your symptoms are. You need to tell us what's wrong with you, and then we will discuss it and decide whether or not you need to see a doctor. And I went, excuse me? I said, I don't even talk to my parents about it. If I need to see a doctor, if I feel I need to see a doctor, I just go see a doctor. I don't tell anyone what's going on. That's between me and the doctor. And I said, well, that's not how we do things here. And I said, well, see you later. I said, you guys are a cult. And I said, I'm out. I said, I want a refund. I want a full refund. And I'm leaving tonight. I'm out of here. So that's when all the venom came out. You're turning your back on Jesus. You're not going to be forgiven this. You're going to end up in hell. God's going to condemn you and curse you and all these different things. And I'm like, there it is. There it is. Now the truth's really coming out. You know, you guys have got no idea. And so I went around, I gathered everyone together. I told them exactly what had just happened and what the go was. And I said, I'm out. And they half of them, more than half of the group left with me. It was just this mass exodus out of there. And I ended up in Armidale, of all places, for a bit. And then I ended up in Wollongong, where I nursed my grandfather until he died. And then I applied. I was at the church. The minister of the church said, why don't you apply for SMBC, City Mission Bible College? So I did and got into that, and then started there in 96, and that's where I met Stu.
Oh, right.
1996, SMBC.
So there isn't going to be a documentary about the cult that you're in?
No.
Because you actually managed to get out. Because a lot of those ones that people can't get out of.
I'll tell you what freaked me out. It didn't freak me out. It got me angry. Because I stayed on campus. I stayed on in the single men's quarters at SMBC. And one day the phone rang, and when someone answered, said, Marty, there's a call for you. I went, rightio, which was unusual because no one ever rang me. And so I went and I got on the phone. I said, yeah, it's Marty. Who is it? And they said who it was, and it took me straight back there. Somehow, I don't know how. To this day, I still don't know how. Cornerstone in Dolby tracked me down and knew where I was, and rang me, and I copped another mouthful saying I just went, look, I just fired up. Said, don't ever contact me again. I don't know how you got this number. I don't know how you know where I am, but I never want you to contact me again. And if you do, I will have you charged for harassment, and slam the phone down. And never heard from him again. It was just really, really unusual. You know, it'd been over 12 months since I was there, and they were still able to track me down, still had an interest. So I've just found it very strange.
Yeah, right.
And still do. It's just one of those mysteries I'll never have the answer to.
Because your original intention was to go and study the Bible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then you finally got there to SMBC.
That's right.
It's Sydney Missionary
Sydney
Bible
Missionary
College.
Bible College, correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you met Stu there. So
Correct.
what's happening? Oh, by the way, I did find the Big Day Out lineup, 1995. Ministry, like you said, was a headliner.
Yeah.
Primal Scream.
Yes.
Hole.
Yes.
The Cult.
Yes.
The Offspring.
Yes.
Screaming Trees.
Uh-huh.
And UMI,
Uh-huh.
Silverchair,
Uh-huh.
and I'm just mentioning the ones that I really know, but there's plenty of other ones.
Yeah.
Spiderbait were
Spiderbait,
way
yeah,
lower
yeah,
down the
that's
list, so not too bad a lineup.
No, it wasn't a bad lineup at all. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I remember seeing UMI. I remember seeing Hole.
Offspring would have been real big at that time.
Yeah. I went to Screaming Trees.
Okay.
That was because they were the more Seattle band, and I was more into that type of, Nirvana and
The grunge area.
grunge
era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
right.
yeah.
Cool. So that would have endeared you to Stu, being interested in the grunge era as well.
Brother, have you not heard how we met?
No. Tell us the story. Story number 552.
I told you, man.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so Stu, came out of the dining room and just heading up towards the library or wherever I was going, accommodation or whatever. And here's this bloke comes bounding down. I remember I was wearing Australian football jersey, ARU, rugby union jersey, jeans.
Yep.
I think I had a mullet going, and I might have been wearing cherry red Docs.
Wow.
10 holes. It had to be 10.
10 holes.
Wouldn't wear 8.
Is 10 for where you put the shoelaces?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
10
Yep.
holes.
Right. Got it.
Yeah. And this bloke came bounding down with a shaved head, dyed green.
Really?
Dyed green. Dyed green. And so I'm pretty much straight out of the Kimberley. Never seen a guy with dyed green hair before or anything like that. And he just came up and he goes, "Hey man, my name's Stu, and what's your name? Please meet or whatever." And I just looked at him. I didn't even answer. In his words, I just grunted at him and then kept going. And Stu goes, he tells the story anyway. He says, "Yes, from that day, I knew I was going to make him my mate." And so the relationship began with him chasing me. And
Sounds pretty cute.
it was cute. But that's when I met, because Tim Baldwin was at the time, and Stu, and I also met Fee Francesconi at SMBC as well.
Yeah, right.
And they were telling me all about Soul Revival Church and trying to get me into, you got to come to Soul Revival Church. And I said, "Oh man, I'm in a youth group. I'm running a youth group. I can't just drop that and come."
Okay.
And they're like, "Yeah, you got to come." I'm like, "Dude."
What church were you going to at the time?
St. Chad's at Putney.
St. Chad's.
At Putney.
Okay.
Do you know where that is?
No, I know where Putney is.
Yeah,
yes.
Putney. It's a nice little suburb, actually.
Oh.
It's just kind of just hidden away there. It's one of those little gems hidden away.
Yeah, very good.
Near Ryde. Anyway, it was a small church, and they wanted someone to run a youth group. There was a school across the road, and we just tapped into that, and it's still running today, as far as I know.
Oh, that's cool.
So that was pretty cool.
But I feel like you did eventually head over to, when Soul Revival was like Guymere, that's when they were hassling.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So 96, 97, 98, I was at SMBC, so I was still doing Putney. And then 99, I'd finished college at the end of 98, and 99 I moved over to Hurstville with some friends from college. We had a share house, and that's when I started coming to Soul Revival. So Guymere became my church. I used to go from Hurstville or Bexley actually to Guymere every weekend for Soul Revival and for church. So
I don't think we knew each other very well back then, but I still remember you always this big dude turning up in a Rabbitohs jersey.
That's right. So that's when I started going. That's when I got to meet everyone, and I think the fact that Stu and I were already friends was that helped.
Yep.
It went a long way. So it was kind of like a trusted person straight away. If Stu trusts him and mates, then it's all good. So and been associated ever since.
Pretty much.
That's
cool. And so what if you've been to SMBC, were you working at the time?
No, full-time study.
Just killing it at the college.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And then, so what was your plans once you graduated from college? Did you wanted to go into ministry somewhere?
I did. Want to go into ministry somewhere. What that looked like, I don't know. And I actually ended up in Wingham. I don't know if you remember that. But in 2000, 2001, I ended up in a town called Wingham up near Taree.
Oh, yeah.
And I was there for 2 years. In fact, my mum was the one who found it. It was random. She called me over from Western Australia and she said, have you seen this job advert in Wingham? And I said, yeah, I saw it, but it was preparing people to go to college. And I'd already been through college. That was the position. And I'm like, so I didn't apply. Like, oh no, apply. So, all right, I'll do, just to make you happy, I'll apply. So I applied for it, and I didn't think anything of it. And then sometime down the track, I got a phone call from the church, and they said, well, we've shortlisted you. And I went, what? I said, yeah, we've shortlisted you. Can you come up and for an interview? I said, yeah, but I don't understand the role. The role is to train someone up to prepare them for college. They said, yeah, but everyone who's applied for it's already been in college. And I went, oh, right, yeah. And so I went up there and interviewed and got the job, clearly, and left and went up to Wingham for 2 years. Which is interesting.
Prepared for college, or were you already?
Yeah, no, I was, yeah. Oh no, I wasn't prepared for college. But that was an interesting time. That's in the Newcastle diocese, that was an interesting place to work at the time. We won't go too much into that, but
But
yeah.
Did you end up being kind of like a senior minister position? Is that what it ended up being, or is it?
No. It was an assistant's role there.
Okay.
And yeah, so I was doing an evening service, running a youth group, running a youth drop-in centre with another guy. They doing scripture in 2 schools, ICF in the high school, and a day a week they had me working in their op shop. So it was very busy and very varied. Yeah, it was varied, that's right, but very busy.
Was the stuff that you like being involved with students or involved, did that help in terms of youth ministry especially and things like that?
It did.
It's always difficult to implement new ideas.
It is difficult to implement new ideas, and especially if you haven't got people on your side.
Yeah, or want to jump on board with some
that's
new
right.
ideas. Yeah, okay.
So that made it. That was hard. Stu and I were on the phone quite a bit during that time, and yeah, so that was okay. I remember. When did you do Year 12?
I finished Year 12 in 2004.
Oh no, because Stu and that brought up the Year 12 group. They were going on the bus at the time to the Gold Coast, and they pulled in and
it would have been the crew from they were on schoolies.
Yeah, on schoolies. Yeah,
right.
There was a night. They spent a night at Taree or something. I went out there and at this caravan park and sat around this fire, and that was good.
Nice. Yeah. So you're only there for 2 years in Wingham?
I was there for 2 years.
What's next after Wingham?
Came back to Gymea.
Gosh, you've lived in a lot of places, but yep, came back to Gymea.
Yeah, came back to Gymea. Applied for different youth positions around, because I mean that's what I was into. Youth positions around Sydney, and it just didn't happen. So I ended up doing security work So in a secular job, doing security for 3.5 years. And that was a bit interesting. Store security as well. So you're accusing people of stealing all the time.
Oh, that's fun.
Which is always fun.
Yeah.
And you just, anyway, 3.5 years. And then a friend of mine in Tasmania rang me up and said, hey, they're looking for ministers, people to come down to Tasmania to be ministers. Why don't you come down? Why don't you come down?
Mm.
I'm like, oh, really?
So
He
much
goes,
enthusiasm.
yeah. He goes, yeah, come on. So anyway, he goes, contact the bishop. So I did. And he said, you sound like the type of person we want down here. So, but you need to come down and get involved in a church for 12 months. So I went, oh, rightio. And that was a massive commitment. So I gave up. I wasn't going to anything apart from a church. There was no job. There was nowhere. I didn't know where I was going to live or anything. I was still single, so had that flexibility, and so I just did. Just gave up my job. I was living with Robbie Jones and Greg McIntyre at the time in Grata, where Robbie and Kate live now. I was living in that house. And went down to Tasmania and got involved in a church for 12 months. And at the end of the 12 months, I sat through 6 hours of interviews. And after that, they decided not to put me on.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm
After
like,
the 12 months.
after that. And I'm like, and all this time they're saying, yeah, we want you. You're gonna, we want you. And then they decided not to. And I went, okay. Well, thanks for that.
So what
Packed up my stuff and left.
What do you think God's like doing in your life right now? Because he seems to speak to you at really important moments. Is he?
Yeah, you try to take life lessons out of everything, and you try to work out what God's trying to teach you in all these places. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know if should I have even gone down there for 12 months. I think my 12 months time down there was just to help my mate, get alongside of him. He was really struggling. And I think his cry out was not so much for me to come down and be ordained. I think it was for me to come down and support him in his church. That's what I took out of it. I think just, I don't know, I've always listened out and always been looking to what God wants me to do and where he wants me to go and being sensitive to that. I just think that's one of those, I don't know, I've always felt sensitive to God like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's taken me to some interesting places and put me into some interesting situations. But it's always been for a purpose. It's not for nothing. And it's not just for a life lesson either. It's been more than that. But I've certainly grown through it.
And you're doing, it's not really just for you, he's like working through you.
Absolutely.
To
absolutely.
make his will happen.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then, so what about your family? So you've got your wife Fiona, and then
So we've been married 15 years.
Yeah.
Got a son and a daughter.
So when did you get together? Hang on, when did you and Fee get together?
Well, Stu.
Did he have green hair this time?
No, he didn't have green hair. It actually wasn't long after I came back from Tasmania, because I went from Tasmania to Southwest Rocks, and I lived in Southwest Rocks for about 6 months. And it was when I was living there, I got a phone call from Stu saying, "Man, I've got someone I want you to meet on the phone." And I said, "Oh, all right, yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I don't normally do stuff like this. I don't set up people or anything like that. But when I'm talking to this girl, it's like I'm talking to you." And I thought, is that a good thing? But anyway, so he goes, just talk to her. And it was actually on Fee's birthday. Fee was at Stu and Lou's place for dinner. And so he just put her on. And I just went, "Hello?" And she went, "Hello?" And I said, "Oh, I think Stu wants us to get to know each other, eh?" And she goes, "Yeah, I think she gets the same idea." And it was really strange, because as soon as I heard her voice, you make of this what you will, but as soon as I heard her voice, God said to me, "This is the woman you're going to marry." Oh, yeah, okay. And so I just knew from the moment it was, that whole song from, I can't remember the name of it, but as soon as she said hello, and I just knew that that's who I was going to marry. And so, yeah, we spoke. We didn't see each other for 6 weeks. I spoke on the phone, and then Fee came up to Southwest Rocks and we met, and 6 months later we were married.
Wow. Man, it happened quick.
It happened quick. What was I? It was 2007. I was 36, and Fee's 4 years younger than me. So if you don't know what you want at 36, then there's no time to muck around.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, right. And you've got 2 kids.
2 kids. Yeah, Zach's our oldest. He's 13, and Adeline is 11.
What do you reckon that, I like to always ask this question to people that are parents, what do you think God teaches you through becoming a parent? Because I love these answers.
Patience.
Yes. Agreed.
Patience. You learn a lot about yourself. As I said, I grew up in a violent background, and so it was very conscious of how I was going to discipline my kids if I'm not going to, and it's just how am I going to do that, and what am I going to be like. My background was always in the forefront of my mind in the way I responded to things, and so to this day, still, it's still there. There are times there. Zach's a teenager and he's testing boundaries as a teenager, and it's still there. It's still got to keep myself in check. And how do I deal with my son and talk through these things, and at the same time there's consequences for his actions or whatever, and so how do you discipline in that? And so it's working out different ways, meaningful for him as well. He's got to know that what they've done is wrong. It doesn't matter if it's my son or my daughter. What they've done is wrong, and there has to be consequences for that, be it, time out, or your device is gone from you for a week or a day, or depending on what it was. Just things like that.
And I think God uses so many different situations to reveal where our sin is as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And like that happens even when you get married. It reveals how selfish you are. And then you have kids. Wait till you have kids, right? And then
it's next level. That's next level.
Yeah.
And it's humbling.
Yep.
It really is humbling. It's something I've put into practice. It's a biblical thing. It's a godly thing to do. I confess my sins daily, multiple times, sometimes in a day. Yeah. And even after I've confessed them, I go and do something or say something stupid. I'm like, and it doesn't become a burden. It's not a works thing I'm saying there. What I'm saying is, it's, as you've just mentioned, it's highlighting the more you confess and you humble yourself before God, the more you appreciate, understand, and honour the cross and what Jesus has done. And that your salvation is not dependent upon you. Because if my salvation was dependent upon me, I'd never be saved.
Yeah, that's right.
I just wouldn't be saved. I'd be, and I just recognise that each day.
I mean, like, I can't remember exactly where it is in the New Testament. It talks about bringing your sin into the light is when you can actually allow the Spirit to change you.
Absolutely.
And as you confess that. And I think that's also a really important thing as being as a parent, is showing that you aren't, because your children look up to you so much, you aren't the picture of perfection. Jesus is. So you can use the cross, as you're saying, as an example for when I do sin, that I need to confess it, whether it's against, even, you get upset at your kids or something. Like, that's something that I try really hard to do is, with my kids, is no matter what I've done, I come back and go, I'm sorry I behaved like that. I shouldn't have done that. This is on me, not you guys as well, like to a large degree. Absolutely.
And I do exactly the same. Like, if I've lost it too much, then I will go, look, and I'll go to my son or my daughter and I'll say, look, I shouldn't have spoken as harshly as I did. I said, what you did, I'm not excusing you, but the way I responded was not in a godly way.
Yeah, I do the same.
And so they still understand what they've done is wrong, but I'm learning and trying to teach them how to respond in a more godly way.
I think the beautiful part of that is that how quickly your kids do forgive you when you do that as well.
Absolutely.
They just go, that's okay.
Yeah, they do.
Mine do. They go, that's okay.
That's right.
But
exactly.
As adults, we're like still holding on to what we've done. We're not forgiving ourselves. Like, we're not letting God to know that God has dealt with that.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, but like, our children are helping us to see that God has dealt with that the way that they do. So it's lovely. And again, God revealing His power and His might in all different situations in our lives.
Absolutely.
It's one of the best parts about being a Christian, I think, is just seeing Him in every single facet of our lives.
Yeah, I agree.
Just before I ask the final question, bring us up to the present.
Yeah.
What are you doing these days, and where do you see God taking you from now?
Well, over I work for Anglicare.
Okay.
So I'm a chaplain with Anglicare. I've been with them 6 years now. For majority of that time, I was working in aged care. But in the last month, it's only been a month, in prisons. So I work at Long Bay
as a chaplain.
I work at Long Bay. Yeah.
Jeez, that must be
correctional centre.
Yeah, right. What's it like being a chaplain? Not just, I mean, you might not be able to reveal much about working in prison ministry. Yeah. But even in aged care, what's it like being a chaplain? Do you really like it?
I do. It's not something I thought I would go into. In fact, the day I started, I was praying to God on the way to work. I said, Lord, you got to give me a pastor's heart for these people, these elderly people. I said, look, because I don't think I knew I didn't have the patience within me to sit and listen to people's ailments and problems and all that. I just didn't. And so that's one of the things I prayed for. I prayed for a pastor's heart for them. And he gave it to me. The moment I walked in the door, there was this little old lady sitting in the foyer in a chair, and she I was introduced to her as the new chaplain, and she put her hand out. She put her left hand, sorry, put out her hand to me, and she was non-verbal. She couldn't speak, and then she took my hand, and she just gently held it, and then kissed my hand, welcomed me to the home, and straight away I could feel my heart just melt. And from then on, I could listen to people's ailments till the cows come home. It just doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
And God just really gave me a heart for the people. And I loved working in aged care. One of the things that you get to appreciate and understand is that every single person has a story. I mean, you're listening to part of my story today.
Yeah.
But everyone has that. And these guys, especially ones I was talking to, have lived through history. You know what I mean? These guys are born either around World War One or just after World War One, and they've lived through all of that. Mm-hmm. And just to talk to them and hear their stories was just fascinating. And it gave me a greater appreciation for elderly people. Like, it just did. And God really blessed the ministry as well. So I saw so many people become Christians. Yeah. And it was a blessing. I think the oldest person that became a Christian was 99. 99. And he's still going. He's 101 this year. And he keeps going. He said to me, Marty, how come it took so long for me to get to know Jesus? I said, don't worry about that, brother. The fact is you know him and he knows you now. It doesn't matter that you're 99. Right. It just shows, mate, And but the gospel just transformed him. He goes, mate, I thought I was living life. He goes, but I'm only just started living life at 99. And he's just amazing. Yeah, I miss that guy. But yeah, there's so many stories like that. So there's lots of good things, but I wasn't prepared for, I'm working in aged care facilities. I wasn't really prepared for death and the amount of death. And I've seen a lot of death in the last 5.5 years or so. And that takes its toll. Especially when you've got your model of ministry that is being shown and taught to you and modeled to you by Stu, where it's your whole life, you just throw your whole being into it. And that's what I did. And I just didn't see people as numbers and all that. It was a friendship, And so you build relationships, and then the hard thing about that is it's your friends who are dying, and then you got to do your friend's funeral. And when you're doing, when you're seeing all your friends dying and you're doing all your friends' funerals, it just it takes a toll.
Yeah.
And it was time. I was ready to move on when this position came up for Long Bay, and I was asked to apply for it, and so I did. And was successful. So have been working at Long Bay now for a month.
Yeah, right. Well, probably then you can have the same effect as you did with it. Hopefully there's
it's interesting.
God has the same effect and a lot of people become Christians there.
Yeah, that'd be great. I am excited to see what God's going to do. Everyone I've said, I'm going to go to Long Bay, going to prison. Oh, you're going to be so good at that and this and that. I'm like, well, you clearly know something more than I do, because I've got no idea. Again, because of particularly what was the same prayer I prayed for a pastor's heart, I did the same for this, and God's given me that. There's an interesting array of offenders in there, and I work in maximum security, so these guys have done some pretty horrendous stuff, and it's interesting that God's kind of given me like a neutrality. So what I mean by that is there's no anger, there's not bitterness or anything, when they tell you what they've done or whatever. You just feel neutral. There's no real great deal of compassion and love and empathy, but there's no hatred and anger or anything. It's just this, and I think that's a right way at the moment. That's what I'm thinking. It's what I need at the moment, certainly to be introduced and to start this role, is to feel this neutrality, because you can't. Some of the things that are done are horrendous, and you can't condone it. Right, but I'm not there to condemn, because they're already in there. They've been judged by the judge and a jury, or they're waiting to go to court or whatever. They've been caught, and there's very little support in that sense in the jail. And as a chaplain, that's what you're there for. You're there to be an ear, basically. Someone that they know you're not going to be judged by them, someone that you can journey with them. But at the same time, you can't just believe everything that's said, and there's a lot of wisdom needed, which I'm discovering, and that's something that's prayed for. I pray for every day. All the chaplains pray for that every day, for wisdom. I pray on the armor of God every day. I find that important, because we're in a spiritual battle, as Paul says in Ephesians 6. We're in a spiritual battle. It's not against flesh and blood, and ministry, you're at the forefront of that battle. But in prison, you seem even more so. Right. Like it's really in your face, and so that's what I pray for every day. Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, it would take a lot of prayer and a lot of relying on God in those kind of situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The final question.
Yeah.
Looking back over your life, which we have done.
Yeah.
What do you wish you knew when you were a younger Christian that you do know now?
That's slightly different to the question you said at the start. But anyway, because I had an answer.
Well, tell me your answer, and then...
I suppose for me, there is nothing and no sin that you can do or commit that Christ's death on the cross and his blood shed cannot forgive and wash away. I think and you alluded to it before, we carry guilt. A lot of us carry guilt.
Yep.
Not all, like some of us more so than others, and it might only be for a short period of time, as you said. If we carry on with this guilt of the way we spoke to kids or whatever when they've already moved on. But that's where Jesus' death is sufficient, not just to forgive our sins, but to take our guilt away as well. And we can be really, and we do it ourselves. We cripple ourselves with our own guilt because we don't tend to hold on to the promises that God makes within his word. So, for example, in 1 John chapter 1 verse 9, it says that if we confess our sins, God is faithful, he is just, he forgives you your sins and purifies you from all unrighteousness. That's a promise. And I don't think we hold on to those promises very well. I think we hear them sometimes. But sometimes I feel like as Christians, we need to punish ourselves more than what God really wants for us to be punished. Jesus has taken that punishment. But sometimes I think we feel like that we should feel guilty. I should feel guilty for what I've done. And I need to carry that guilt for a while. But we're no longer bondage to sin. We're slaves to Christ. And that's one of the things I pray. When I do confess, because that's what verse 8 says, if we say that we're without sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth isn't in us. But if we confess our sins, right? So it is something that I do on a daily basis, and it is one of these things that I do as well, is I claim God's forgiveness. I hold on to that promise. I remind him of that promise, and I think that's a biblical thing. You read through all the Psalms, and all the psalmists, David or whoever's writing the psalm, is reminding God of who God is, what he had done, and the promises that he made to God's people. And these are promises in Scripture that he has made to us. And it's not a wrong thing and a bad thing to remind him of that. I think that's a biblical principle. And it acknowledges who he is and who we are, the creator and the creature. That Christ's death on the cross is sufficient to cover everything that I've ever done. And that's freeing.
I agree.
And that's what I would want to know.
Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, we need to be constantly reminded of that.
Absolutely.
Because we drag it on
we do
ourselves rather than listening to God and saying, no, I've dealt with it.
Yeah, we do.
Well.
Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic way to finish the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on, Marty. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you for having me, Joel. It's been wonderful, mate.
That's great. Well, all the stories, fantastic. None of which I've heard before, which is awesome. Yeah. And I think it's been really encouraging as well to hear how God has been working on you all your life, and backing up what you just said there, of he's continually reminding you.
Absolutely.
Isn't he?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I find that what you've said across all of your, like looking back at all your life, I find it really encouraging. That I love hearing the stories of other people, including yourself, and hearing how God is working on them in all different ways. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for everyone to listening or watching. We really appreciate it. Thanks also to producer Dave, who works tirelessly behind the scenes to make these podcasts happen. And Marty, we always like to finish with a one way. Are you happy to join me in a one way?
Absolutely, brother.
Right.
One way.